Raising alligators for fun and profits. Crocodiles, or any large reptile will do. Of all the animals on God's earth, few are as dreaded as the alligator. This reptile, a relative to crocodile, which will forever be associated with Florida Everglades and the swamps of Louisiana, can grow to around 10 feet and could bite off your leg with one bite. The alligator has become the stuff of urban legend also, with rumours of them living in the drains of cities and emerging at night to terrify the townies. Nearly everyone has heard stories of sewer workers disappearing, or only the disembodied bodies being found, the disembodied boots being found. The very mention of the word alligator can be sufficient to send shivers down the spines of the more imaginative city dwellers. Good parents warn their offspring not to play near storm drains, as the alligators will get you. Other, less loving relatives encourage playing near storm drains in the hopes that the dreaded amphibians might get their attached from their offspring, but that's a subject for another day. With this reputation, you might wonder why anyone would even consider raising these animals, and the notion that there could be either fun or profit in such an enterprise must feel wholly ridiculous. Nevertheless, I have to tell you that such a thing has been tried, and a lot of fun and a not inconsiderable profit did come from the enterprise, at least at first. In this story, I'm going to tell you who did it and how it was done, and how it eventually came to a sad end. How did the brilliant idea of raising alligators originate? In the last years of the previous century, there was a circus strongman called the Great Atlas. He called himself by that name because Atlas was synonymous with strength, because the Greek god with the same name, who was said to hold the world on his shoulders. Our man couldn't do that, but since show people are inclined to exaggerate in order to get the punters in, that was the name he chose for himself. The circus operated in the southern states of the USA, being very popular in the Florida and Louisiana area. When they fetched up at a town, people would come from miles around to see the usual circus display of clowns, acrobats, and animals, but the top of the bill was always the Great Atlas. The audience would gasp when he raised the 2,000-pound weight above his head. Sometimes he would pull an elephant in a cart, and that was truly a sight to see. The customers flocked in droves. Everyone was very happy, and the circus made loads of money. Then, as can happen in show business, the crowd stopped coming. There is only so many times that people are willing to see a grunting man pull a startled elephant across the circus ring. Saturation point had been reached. The circus started to lose money. Elephants do cost rather a lot to feed. There was a danger that they would have to go out of business altogether, unless they could think up some way to get the punters back in. The strong man was very worried. He knew that everything really depended on him. He had been the big draw. If he couldn't come up with a new and exciting act, it was goodbye for the circus. He decided to take a walk around the city to try to think of something. Now, as happens in the best stories, just when things are at the blackest, salvation comes. In this particular town, Miami I think it was, alligators really did live in the drains, and one of these reptiles was taking an evening constitutional just as our hero happened along. It was a hungry alligator as well. While the Great Atlas was standing dejectedly on the footpath, sidewalk if you're an American, the ravenous amphibian sneaked up behind him, intending to snack off his rippling calf. The strongman heard the animal just in time. He spun round to see a 10-foot alligator snapping his jaws at him, and wasn't about to ask him directions, or was he a Republican, or did he support those damn Democrats? With very quick thinking and his great strength, he seized the ferocious reptile before it could draw breath for another strike. The iron grip from his left hand clamped his mouth shut. His other hand grasped its tail and he raised it above his head. Then he carried the dazed amphibian over his head until he reached a stream that was conveniently at the end of the street. He threw the alligator into the river, and immediately applause and cheering rang out from a huge crowd that had been attracted to the spectacle. That was what gave him his great idea. He would save the circus by combining demonstrations of his great strength with exhibitions of his incredible bravery. The elephant would be honourably retired. From now on he would wow the punters by raising alligators over his head, and fun and profit would be sure to follow. Sometimes raising alligators can go drastically wrong. This was easy enough to organise. Alligators are very common in Florida. He bought two of the biggest and most ferocious specimens he could get from a man that farmed them. He read up on the dietary requirements of the Florida reptiles to make sure that they would be properly fed. The truck that had been the travelling home of the retired elephant was converted for the use of the alligators. They even managed to put a special pool in it for them. They rigged up plasma screen television to prevent the amphibious stars of the circus from being bored. The two reptiles actually enjoyed watching it. The only program that they could never watch was Judge Judy. For some reason, the sight of that feisty and distinguished lady really freaked the alligators. If her program came on, they would hide at the bottom of the pool, and it would not emerge until it was over. I think it had something to do with her occasional courtroom outbursts. On performance night, both alligators would be used. The great actress would amaze the audience by raising one of them above his head. The other would be in the background, snapping ferociously. They were both trained to do this, although the soft living had really made them rather tame. They were not considered to be in any way dangerous. For a climax, he would grasp both of the beasts by their snouts and wave them around his head, to gasps from the audience. The applause would almost bring the house down, or the tent, if you want to be pedantic. Things went from good to better for the circus, now that the chief attraction was drawing such adoring crowds. But even as there was serpent in the Garden of Eden, something was bound to come along and spoil things. That esteemed justiciar, Judge Judy decided to take a holiday to our grandchildren in Florida. As a special treat on their first night, she decided to take them to the circus. You see, Judge Judy really is a very kind lady. The abrasiveness is saved for court, usually. On this particular night, she was sitting in the second row of the circus. As she didn't want to be bothered by autograph hunters or amateur TV critics, she was wearing an enormous pair of sunglasses to prevent recognition. In front of her sat a woman with an enormous hat. This kind of annoyed our judge, because it was blocking her view of the performance. She several times suggested to the woman that she ought to remove the headwear, but with no result. Judge Judy was getting like a boiler about to explode. If you were watching clearly, you could see the wisps of steam starting to escape from her nose and ears. The alligator performance was reaching its climax. The strong man had both reptiles by their snouts above his head, and was just about to start waving them around. The audience was hushed. The judge still could not see properly. Two rather rigid taps on the offender's shoulders brought still no result. That brought on the long-delayed explosion. "Get that hat off now!" Judge Judy roared. The effect on the two alligators was immediate and electrifying. When they heard the voice that could leave them shivering at the bottom of their pool for hours, they panicked. The great Atlas could not hold them. They jumped from his grasp and landed right on top of the woman with the big hat. 2 snaps later, and she had neither hat nor head. All the rest of the audience, including the judge, raced for the exits. That ended the show for that night. That also ended that chapter in the career of the great Atlas. Afterwards, the racing of alligators or crocodiles as a circus act was banned. Luckily, enough money had been made to give honourable retirement to both the strongman and his amphibian co-stars. The alligators occasionally take part in some of the more contrived natural history programs, but they have it written into their contract that Judge Judy is barred from the studio during filming.